They say not to stop in the tunnel after dark. I didn't plan to, but when my chain snapped halfway through, I had no choice. And that was when I heard the scraping behind me. I was biking home from my friend's place just past 10 p.m. Too late. Honestly, the temperature had dropped fast, and fog clung to the asphalt in low, slow waves. The road was rural, 2 lanes, no lights, no cars. Just me, my bike, and the tunnel. Locals call it Shepherd's Mouth, a 100-yard stone tunnel under the hills, so old it probably predates the road itself. I'd ridden through it dozens of times in daylight. But at night, it's something else. It's long enough that, even at full speed, you're in darkness for a good 20 seconds. The only light comes from whatever you bring in with you. No overheads, no reflectors, just the curve of cold stone swallowing your path. That night, as I pedaled in, I flicked on my bike's headlamp. The beam cut through the mist just enough to keep me straight. The tunnel always smells like mildew and cold stone. But this time, the air felt stiller than usual. Like the wind itself didn't want to go in. About halfway through, there was a metallic ping, then a jolt beneath me. My chain snapped. My pedal went slack. I swore, rolled to a stop, and climbed off, frustration bubbling. That's when I realized how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. Not middle of nowhere quiet. I mean oppressive, suffocating silence. Like the tunnel swallowed every sound, even my breath. I clicked off my light for a moment just to test it. And in the dark, I heard it scrape, shuffle, scrape, faint, behind me, maybe 10 or 15 feet. Back, I spun around and snapped the light back on. Nothing, just mist and stone, empty path stretching behind me to the tunnel's mouth where the moon hung like a dim coin through the fog. I waited, listened, silence. Maybe something fell. A small rock. An animal. I told myself that. Over and over. Picked up the bike and started walking. Each step echoed sharp and hollow. The tunnel magnified every sound, even my breathing. But after 10 steps, scrape, shuffle, it started again, not mimicking my pace, following it, lagging just slightly. I didn't turn, not yet. Instead, I slowed my steps deliberately. 1, 2. The sound behind me slowed too. Same timing. Just a little behind. That's when the panic really hit. I stopped. It didn't. Scrape, scrape, shuffle. I turned. This time, something was there. It stood just within the edge of my headlamp's range, 15 feet back. At first, I thought it was a person. Tall, still, but no detail. Just silhouette and shadow and something horribly off. Its limbs were too long, not in a basketball player way, wrong in a geometry doesn't work here way. Arms that bent slightly backward, shoulders too narrow, head tilted too far to one side, like it was listening. It didn't move. I did. I walked faster, dragging the bike now. Chain clinking with every step. I didn't look back, not until I reached the end where the moonlight spilled in and the mist thinned. I turned, just once, from the tunnel mouth. It was standing just inside the dark, where the tunnel curved, where the light couldn't quite reach. Still watching, I stepped out into the open air, heart pounding. No footsteps followed. No scraping, just silence. I fixed the chain right there on the roadside in the moonlight. Hands shaking, didn't care, didn't look back. I haven't used that tunnel since. But sometimes, when I drive past it late at night, I slow down just a little, and every now and then, I swear I see something tall standing just inside the stone arch, waiting for the next person who stops. It started with a faint scratching under my bed, like nails dragging along old wood, easy to blame on mice or the house settling at first. But when it whispered my name back to me, I knew it was listening for something more. My bedroom is small, just a single window that rattles when the wind hits right, a creaky floor that betrays every step. The bed sits against the far wall, pushed close enough to the baseboard that you'd think nothing could fit beneath it. But every night, when the house goes still, I hear it. At first, it was just scratching, soft, rhythmic, like something digging at the floorboards. I'd hold my breath, pressed my ear to the mattress, half convinced it was my imagination. The first night I slipped out of bed and flicked on the light. Nothing, just dust bunnies and a stray sock under the frame. But the noise came back, louder each night, closer. Last week, I woke to a cold draft brushing my face, even though my window was shut tight. The scratching had stopped. Instead, I heard a low, wet breathing like something exhaling slow, heavy sighs against the underside of my mattress. I lay frozen, clutching my blanket under my chin like it could keep me safe. My heart thumped so loud I thought it would drown out the breathing, except the thing beneath me matched it. Every time my heartbeat jumped, the breathing did too, as if it was sensing itself with me. I told myself I'd look just once, prove to myself it was nothing. So I reached over, flicked on my nightstand lamp, and forced myself to lean over the edge. The space under the bed was too dark, impossibly dark. The lamplight seemed to stop right at the edge of the frame, swallowed up like a mouth waiting to be fed. Then I saw movement. Something shifting just out of sight, like a shadow crawling backward into deeper black. I bolted upright so fast I hit my head on the headboard. For days, I tried to ignore it. I stuffed blankets in the gap, shoved old boxes and shoes under the bed to block whatever space was left. It didn't help. The scratching just got angrier, scraping at the boxes until I'd find them shoved halfway across the room in the morning. Then came last night. It was almost 2 a.m. when I woke up to complete silence. No scratching, no breathing, just the steady tick of my clock on the dresser and my own pulse ringing in my ears. I thought maybe it was over until I heard my own voice whisper up from under the bed. It said my name soft, almost tender. Then it said it again and again, each time. It sounded more like me, like someone mocking me with my own mouth. I didn't want to listen. I covered my ears, squeezed my eyes shut. But the voice didn't stop. It changed. I know what you did, it hissed. My stomach dropped. Because deep down, I knew exactly what it meant. Years ago, I'd done something I'd buried so far down I barely believed it myself anymore. An accident behind my old school, something no one else saw. Something I never told a soul. But this thing under my bed knew every detail, every lie I told to bury it. I stayed awake until dawn, eyes locked on the ceiling, waiting for sunlight to push the darkness back under the frame. When I finally dared to peek, the space under the bed was empty, silent except for my own ragged breathing. Tonight, I sit on my bed, lights on, blanket clutched tight. I can hear it again, scratching, breathing, whispering my secret in my own voice like it's feeding on my shame. I don't know what it wants, but I think it wants me to listen. And I'm afraid that one night soon, when I lean over the edge to beg it to stop, I'll see my own face staring back, smiling. I always thought the late bus was the safest place to hide from the dark, until the night I realized something was already waiting for me inside, somewhere behind me. Breathing my name into the humming silence, I was on Route 9, the last bus out of downtown. It was one of those bitter January nights when your breath sticks to your scarf and the windows fog up from the stale heat rattling out of old vents. The bus was mostly empty, except for me and the driver, a guy named Carl, who usually nodded at me through the rear view but never spoke much. That night, I took my usual seat near the back, third row from the end, on the left side by the window. The streetlights outside made halos on the wet asphalt, and the city blurred past like a half-forgotten dream. I put in my earbuds, tried to sink into my playlist, and let the rhythm of the bus lull me. That's when I felt it, a cold draft that seemed to slip under my collar, like someone opening a door that was never supposed to open. I pulled my scarf tighter, turned to look down the aisle. Empty rows. Just me, Carl, and the hiss of the old bus pushing through the frost. But when we passed the gas station near Maple and 12th, the bus lurched. Not hard, just a hiccup, like we'd hit a pothole. The lights flickered once, and when they came back, I wasn't alone anymore. There was a man sitting 2 rows ahead of me, on the opposite side. I hadn't seen him get on. No one had. His coat was too thin for the cold, gray wool buttoned up to his throat. He sat stiff, hands clasped tight on his knees, staring straight ahead at nothing. At first, I thought maybe I dozed off, missed a stop. Missed him boarding, but the knees crawled in anyway. Something about the way he sat so still, like he didn't want to breathe too loud. I watched him for a minute, waiting for him to shift, scratch his nose, something human. He didn't. Then, almost like he knew I was staring, he turned his head just enough for me to see the corner of his face reflected in the window. Pale skin, eyes too dark to catch the light. I looked away fast, pretended to dig for something in my bag. When I glanced back, he was facing forward again. The bus hummed on. The city fell away, streetlights growing sparse as we reached the stretch of old industrial buildings and half-abandoned lots. I tried to shrug it off, probably some guy who missed the last train, keeping to himself. But every so often, I'd catch his reflection. He was watching me in the glass when he thought I wasn't looking. A mile from my stop, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled my earbuds out and stood up, moving toward the front. As I passed him, I felt a sudden rush of cold, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. He turned his head then, fully, and our eyes met. Up close, his face looked wrong. Not scarred or monstrous, just wrong. His eyes were too deep, like looking down a well at night. His mouth opened just enough for me to see his teeth, crooked and gray. "You shouldn't ride alone so late, Anna. My name." He whispered it like he'd been saving it. My feet froze. I don't know how he knew my name. I don't wear a name tag, don't talk to strangers. Before I could answer, Carl shouted from the front, asking if I was okay. I turned to look at him just a second. When I looked back, the man was gone. His seat was empty. No one had gotten off. There were no stops between here and my street. No doors had opened. Just me, the humming bus, and the empty rows. Carl dropped me off outside my apartment like always. I asked him if he'd seen the man. He just frowned and said I'd been the only passenger tonight. Like always, I didn't sleep when I got home. Every squeak of the old radiator made me think I'd see him, waiting in the hallway, coat button tight, eyes dark and endless. Now I'll ride the early bus instead. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the back, I feel it again, a pocket of air gone cold. A reflection in the window, staring back. And I swear, some nights, I hear my name whispered soft and patient just before I close my eyes. The first handprint was small smudged dirt on the outside of the living room window, just above where I sat on the couch. I almost didn't notice it at first. The Miller house was so quiet after I'd tucked little Sophie into bed upstairs. The baby monitor beside me buzzed faintly with her soft breathing, but downstairs the only sounds were the muted hum of the fridge and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I thought maybe Sophie had left it there earlier, but she'd been inside all day. It was too high for her, anyway. I leaned closer to the window. The glass was cold against my fingertips. Outside, the yard was empty, just the porch light haloing a patch of dead grass and the swing set creaking gently in the breeze. I wiped the handprint with my sleeve, shivering when my breath fogged the glass. I didn't think much of it until half an hour later, when I looked up from my phone and saw it again, another smudged handprint. This one was lower, smeared right where my head rested against the back of the couch. I stood up so fast my phone clattered to the floor. The yard was still empty, darker now as the wind rattled the swing chain harder. I flipped off the TV, straining my ears for any sound, a branch snapping, leaves crunching, nothing. I checked the locks twice. Front door, back door, all secure. The Miller's dog, Daisy, usually barked at squirrels in the yard, but she was boarded for the weekend. Just my luck. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe a smudge I missed before. I sat back down, clutching the throw blanket like a shield. The baby monitor crackled softly. Sophie shifted in her crib, a tap. So faint I almost didn't hear it. Then again, tap like fingertips drumming on glass. My chest tightened. I forced myself to look at the window. Another handprint, higher now, stretched long and thin, as if someone taller had pressed their palm flat and dragged it downward. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mr. Miller. Straight to voicemail. Mrs. Miller's number rang until it cut off. I turned the porch light off and on nothing but my own reflection staring back at me through the glass, eyes wide and glistening in the dark. Tap, 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 tap. It was coming faster now. I inched closer, pressing my ear to the cold pane. The glass vibrated with the soft patter of fingers. I squinted into the night, but the porch bulb flickered once and died, plunging the yard into shadows that seemed to move just beyond the window frame. Upstairs, Sophie began to whimper through the monitor. Her tiny voice crackled. "Hello." I bolted for the stairs, 2 at a time, heart hammering so hard I thought I'd drop. I burst into her room. She sat up, sleepy and scared, rubbing her eyes. "There's a man at the window," she whispered. I glanced at her window, just her reflection in the black glass. I hugged her tight, carrying her downstairs with me. Maybe if I left the house. If I waited outside until the Millers came home, I stopped short. In the living room, every window was covered in handprints now. Dozens, maybe more, some so small they looked like children's palms, others large enough to stretch from sill to pane edge. Each print smeared in a trail of grit and grime, as if they'd clawed to get it. I backed away, clutching Sophie against my chest. The baby monitor fell from my pocket, static hissing as the living room clock ticked louder than my pulse. Then just once I heard it through the monitor, behind the crackle a voice, thin and rasping, whispering my name from somewhere out there in the dark. The front door rattled, like someone trying the knob. I locked myself and Sophie in the bathroom. I could still hear its soft taps on the frosted window, the faint scrape of skin against glass. When the Millers got home hours later, they found me and Sophie huddled in the tub, the bathroom door barricaded with towels and a chair. They told me there were no handprints on the windows, not one. Just my own sweaty fingerprints on the inside. But some nights, when I close my eyes, I still feel the cold glass against my skin. And I swear I hear that tapping waiting for me to come look again. I thought the noises above my ceiling were rats until I found the nest of dirty clothes and the Polaroids of me sleeping. Some of the photos were taken just inches from my face. It started with scratching, just faint enough to ignore, just loud enough to keep me up at night. I'd recently moved into an old rental house outside of town, one of those creaky, 2-bedroom places where everything smells faintly of wood rot and forgotten time. The landlord said it had charm. What it had was peeling paint, a flickering hallway light, and insulation so bad I could hear the wind whistle through the sockets. But I liked it. It was quiet, cheap, private. The scratching began about 2 weeks in. Late at night, right above my bedroom. I figured it was rats or squirrels. Maybe raccoons. I even left out some peanut butter on a sticky trap in the crawl space, but nothing ever showed up. Then came the shift. The sounds weren't just scratching anymore, they were deliberate, pacing, like someone crawling slowly across the beams. I tried to rationalize it. Animals get bold. Sounds echo weird in old houses. But then things started going missing. First it was food. Granola bars. A cup of yogurt I know I didn't eat. Then it was stranger stuff with sock, my shaving razor, a paperback I was halfway through. I joked to a friend that my ghost had a skincare routine and loved thrillers. I laughed when I said it, but I didn't feel like laughing when I came home from work and found the attic door hanging slightly open. It was one of those rectangular ceiling panels with the pull string. I never touched it. Didn't even have a ladder tall enough, but there it was, swinging just a little in the draft. The string swayed like it had just been tugged. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Eventually, I shoved a chair under it and pushed the panel shut with a broom handle. That night, the pacing came back a louder, heavier. I barely slept. The next morning, I rented a ladder. It was bright outside when I climbed up and pushed the panel open. I didn't expect to see anything. Maybe droppings. Maybe nests. Maybe I was being paranoid. But the first thing I saw was fabric. A filthy sleeping bag, crumpled in the corner of the attic. Next to it, a pile of clothes, fast food wrappers, a cracked plastic flashlight, and photos. A small stack of Polaroids, spread out like playing cards. Every one of them was of me sleeping. Some were taken from the foot of my bed. Some from behind the door. A few were blurry, too close, like whoever took them was inches from my face. There were at least 20. My blood went ice cold. I backed down the ladder so fast I nearly slipped. Slammed the attic shut. Called the cops. They showed up 20 minutes later, guns drawn. But found nothing. No one. Whoever had been living up there was gone. They took the pictures into evidence. Promised to look into it. They never found him. I didn't sleep in the house after that. Moved into a friend's spare room the same night. I packed my stuff during the day, refused to go back after dark. But here's the part that keeps me up. Weeks later, I was scrolling through my phone the other night trying to clear out space when I noticed something. Photos I didn't remember taking. One was of me brushing my teeth, another of me watching TV on the couch, and the last one was taken from inside my friend's closet. You can see me asleep on their mattress, and just barely. In the reflection of the closet mirror of someone's eye, watching through the crack in the door. It started with footsteps, slow, deliberate pacing above my ceiling, always at midnight, when the dragging noises began, like furniture scraping the floor in the dead of night. I know I wasn't the only one hearing it. I moved into apartment 200 for last winter. The building was old cracked plaster, creaky radiators, but the rent was cheap and the neighbors kept to themselves. The first night I lay in bed, listening to the radiator hiss, I heard it faint steps, a shuffle across the ceiling, like someone walking back and forth in heavy slippers. I figured it was just the tenant in 304, directly above me. It went on every night. Sometimes the pacing would stop right above my bed, so still I could almost feel someone standing there, watching me sleep through the floor. Then the dragging started, something heavy pulled from one end of the room to the other. The floorboards would creak and settle, sending a shiver through my mattress. A week later, I met Mr. Collins from 204A in the hallway. He was old, hair yellowed from too many cigarettes. Always wearing slippers no matter the weather. When I mentioned the noises, he just stared past me and said, "You hear it too, huh?" He tapped his ceiling with a broom once. He said just once. The pacing stopped for a whole hour that night, then came back with twice the footsteps. Curious and a bit annoyed, I decided to talk to whoever lived up there. I knocked on 300 for the next evening. The door was grimy, paint flaking around the frame. I rapped my knuckles against it, half expecting to hear the footsteps inside. Pause. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Still silence. The next day, I asked the building manager about its small office. Stale coffee smell. Stacks of forgotten maintenance requests. He looked up from his crossword, frowning when I said 304. Nobody's lived there in 10 years, he said. Padlocked after the last tenant skipped out and left the place a wreck. No one's got the key but me. I almost left, but the manager wasn't joking. He pulled out a fat ring of keys and offered to show me. I followed him up the worn stairs, past peeling wallpaper and flickering exit signs. At 304, he jangled the keys, found the right one. The padlock clicked open with a reluctant groan. The door swung in, hinges sighing like they hadn't moved in years. Inside was stale air and shadows. Dust lay thick enough to write your name in. A broken chair in one corner. Stained carpet. Faded wallpaper curling like old skin. No signs of squatters. No footprints in the dust except ours. But the strangest part was the drag marks, deep grooves scored into the wooden floorboards, as if someone had pulled a heavy trunk across the room again and again, tracing the same path I heard every night. I didn't sleep well that week. I'd lie awake, staring at my ceiling, hearing the footsteps return like clockwork. Sometimes they'd stop right above me, then start again with that same slow drag. Mr. Collins knocked on my door one night, eyes wide, whispering that he'd heard a voice mumbling upstairs like someone talking to themselves, or maybe to someone else. The manager changed the lock on 304. He sealed the door with a new padlock and even screwed the Windows shut from the outside, but the footsteps never stopped. If anything, they got louder. Sometimes the light fixture above my bed would rattle, plaster dust falling onto my blanket like dandruff. Last night, I swear I heard breathing heavy, strained directly above me. I pressed my ear to the ceiling and for a moment, I thought I felt warmth radiating through the wood. Like someone was lying flat on the floor up there, ear pressed against mine. This morning, I found drag marks on my ceiling, thin scratches like fingernails tracing lazy circles above where I sleep. The manager won't answer his phone anymore. Mr. Collins moved out last night. Left a note wedged in my doorframe that just said, "Don't listen when it whispers your name." The first time I heard my son whisper to the thing under his bed, I thought it was just an imaginary friend until his toys started crawling out from the shadows when no one was looking. Now I listen at his door at night. Too afraid to step inside, we moved into the old house at the start of spring. It was bigger than we needed, creaky in all the usual ways, with warped floorboards and doors that didn't quite latch. The basement smelled like wet dirt and something older, but it was cheap. And after the year we'd had, cheap was all we could afford. My son, Liam, was for then just starting to talk in full sentences, just old enough to say things that made me stop what I was doing and really listen. The first night, he pointed to the dark gap under his new bed and said, "The boy says it's cold down there." I laughed it off. Probably just a dream from the move and too many bedtime stories. But the next night, he said it again, this time with his face half hidden under the blanket. "The boy wants me to stay awake." The third night, I heard him whispering. I stood in the hallway, listening to his small voice drift through the crack in the door. He paused, like he was waiting for an answer, then giggle or nod as if he'd heard something I couldn't. I told myself it was harmless. Kids talk to shadows and dust motes when they're lonely. But one morning, I found his toy truck halfway under the bed, wheels spinning by themselves. I knelt down, reached in to grab it. But my hand brushed something soft and cold, like a damp cloth. I yanked my arm back so fast I scraped my knuckles on the bed frame. I asked Liam if he'd lost anything under there, maybe an old stuffed animal. He just smiled at me, eyes wide. He likes the trucks, he said. He said I can have yours if I help him. That night, I pushed the bed away from the wall and shone my phone's flashlight underneath. Just dust. The lost truck, a few old blocks. But the floor felt colder under my palm than anywhere else in the room, like a draft that shouldn't have been there. I told myself to stop. I'd scare him more if I kept asking. But each night, the whispering grew louder. I'd hear my son say, "Okay, I will," or "Are you still cold?" Once, I swear I heard something answer too low to be his voice, too dry, like old leaves dragging across wood. One night, I decided to sleep in his room. I pulled a blanket onto the floor beside his bed, telling him it was a fun sleepover. He nodded, but kept peeking over the edge, whispering to the dark. I left the light on. Around 2 a.m. and I woke up freezing. The room felt wrong, like the air had sunk into my bones. I heard a soft thump, like plastic rolling. I opened my eyes and saw the toy truck, the same one, spinning in slow circles just outside the shadow under his bed. I pulled Liam onto the mattress with me, holding him tight. He stirred, half awake, mumbling into my shirt. He's stuck down there. He wants my hands to help dig. I don't know why, but that word dig made my stomach turn. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, I sealed the gap under his bed with old towels, boxes, anything to keep the dark hidden. I told him the boy was just a dream. He didn't argue, just looked at me with eyes too old for 4 years. But the toys kept moving. Some mornings I'd find his blocks lined up in a trail from the bed to the closet. Once, I found my own wristwatch there, cold, ticking softly in the dust. Last week, I woke up to Liam standing beside my bed, staring at the floor. "He wants to come up now," he said, voice flat. He said I did good when I tucked him back in. I pressed my ear to the floor beside his bed. For a moment, I heard it too, a scratching. Careful and patient, like fingernails working through wood. I'm writing this in the hallway now, sitting outside his door because I can't stand the thought of leaving him alone in there. Every so often, I hear him whisper, and underneath his soft voice, I hear another too thin, too dry thanking him for letting it out. Sometimes I'd catch my own reflection watching me after I'd already turned away as still locked on mine, lips curved in a grin I wasn't wearing. It never blinked first. I first noticed it on a Monday night. I'd just moved into my new apartment, a cramped studio with creaking floorboards and a single tall mirror that came with the place, bolted to the wall opposite my bed. The landlord said it was antique, a leftover from the last tenant who disappeared mid-lease. The first night, I didn't think much of it. I was half asleep, half listening to the radiator hiss when I glanced up and saw my reflection's hand move just a heartbeat too slow as I pulled my blanket over my shoulder. I blamed the cheap wine, rubbed my eyes, and fell asleep facing the wall instead. By the third night, I started feeling cold drafts in the room. I see pockets that drifted from the mirror like it was leaking winter air. When I leaned in to check the frame, my breath misted on the glass. Even though it was July, I told myself I'd call the landlord in the morning, but the next night was when I really saw it. I'd woken up at 2:37 a.m., the exact same time every night that week, to a low, steady whisper. It wasn't clear at first, more like the sound of wind pushing through a crack. But when I sat up, I realized it was my own voice, whispering my name. I turned to the mirror, half expecting to see nothing, hoping to see nothing. Instead, I saw myself standing at the foot of my bed in the reflection, except I hadn't moved. My reflection's mouth moved, though. It mouthed my name again and again, breath fogging the inside of the glass. I wanted to look behind me to see if I'd somehow sleepwalked, but I couldn't move. My chest was tight. The thing in the mirror raised its hand, my hand, and pressed a finger to its lips. SHHHH. I don't know how long I sat frozen like that. When I finally blinked, the figure was gone. My reflection was just that, me, pale and shaking. I didn't sleep again that night. Over the next week, it got worse. Every night at 2:37 a.m., I'd wake up to the same cold whisper. Sometimes my reflection would wave when I didn't. Sometimes it would turn its head slowly to look behind it into the darkness that should have been my room, its eyes widening as if it saw something crawling up behind me. By the 10th night, I stopped sleeping altogether. I taped an old bedsheet over the mirror, hoping that would kill whatever trick my exhausted brain was playing, but the sheet didn't help. I'd wake up to the sound of fabric rustling and find it pulled aside. The glass exposed my reflection grinning at me like we were sharing a private joke I didn't get. I called my mom, my friends, anyone who'd listen. They said I was just stressed. Moving alone, new job, old building. I wanted to believe them, but they didn't have to see what I did. Last night, I decided enough was enough. I sat up all night, staring into the mirror, daring it to move first. Hours passed, nothing. Just my tired face staring back, eyes sunken, hair limp. Around 2:30, I got brave, stupid, maybe, and stepped closer. I pressed my palm to the glass. It was ice cold, but the surface seemed to tremble under my skin, like a ripple under frozen water. Then I saw it, something darker moving behind my reflection, a shape, almost human, shifting in the shadows behind my mirrored self. It leaned closer, and my reflection's lips split into that same grin. It whispered my name one last time. But this time I heard it with my own ears, not just in my head. Before I could pull my hand away, the glass went soft, like water, like flesh. A cold hand closed around mine and yanked. I woke up on the floor, my arm halfway inside the mirror. But the worst part, the thing staring back at me wasn't moving. It was me. Except I was on the wrong side. Now, I'm sitting here, staring through the glass from inside. I can see my room just like before. My body, what used to be mine, stands on the other side, tilting its head at me. It moves now when I don't. It's free. And every night, at 2:37 a.m., it pulls the sheet aside, so it can watch me try to scream.